Good afternoon, everybody. Great to be here at the YouTube beach on this hot afternoon in Cannes. We have a fantastic panel here, but before I introduce them, I just wanted to set up a little bit of what we're talking about. I think that human insight has been at the heart of the creative brief for a long time now, and humans are complex characters. We have millions of motivations. And what human insight is all about is about narrowing down those motivations to identify one that's going to inspire creativity and storytelling. But I think in today's age, and what we really want to talk about is how media is playing an increasing role within that creative briefing process. And I think that media behaviors are increasingly important in informing that insight. And so if we think about 360-degree video, if we think about user-generated content, as we think about more personalized, addressable content and media, all these are really important when we think about the where, when, and the how we execute. And that can really inform the storytelling and the arc of the story. Because I think that as we get more and more digital, that is increasingly important. And so my belief is that this isn't something new that we're doing as media agents. We've long been collaborating with creative agencies and with brands to ensure that media is coming to the top table. But I don't think that it's happening everywhere yet, and I really believe that there needs to be an increased role in media in informing that holistic insight. And so what's wonderful about this panel is that we have brands and companies and agencies who have some brilliant examples of how we're doing that today. So I have here Mark Sands, who is from Diageo. He's the head of global beer, Baileys, and Smirnoff, probably the best job title I've ever heard. We also have Hermeti, who is the joint ECD of Mother in London. Welcome. And then we have Gary, who is from Mondelēz and is the global head of equity within the organization there. And so, fantastic panel. Mark, can I start with you?
Sure.
And I would just love to get your view on what you think about of the title of today's topic.
Well, I think the question's wrong, because partly it sounds a bit apologetic and sort of, there's a top table that media's not yet invited to, and kind of maybe media should be above creative and one fighting against the other. And yet actually the way that it has to work, I think, is without one being more important than the other. Yeah. And also, if you think of how many clients are also taking either media expertise or creative expertise in-house as well, yeah. You could end up with client versus media versus creative. And actually what's important is consumer first. Yeah. And that's the role, the unique role that media has to play, of being able to define for us who, where, when, and how are they going to consume that media. Yeah. And for us, we spend a lot of time focused on the path to purchase, which in our category in drinks is kind of understanding how people make the decisions about when they're going to go out, where they're going to, what brands they're going to choose. I remember at one stage years ago, we used to think 90% of those decisions happen when you're at the bar. Yeah. And you have just a minute to sort of look up and down and see what brands you can see. And what we know now from a lot of the data that we get from Cara and from our media partners is actually that decision happens way before, and it happens in different ways according to the occasion. Yeah. And so that understanding of the occasion, an understanding of where you have to be visible, you no longer have to be just visible at the bar, you have to be visible when people are searching to understand what kind of beer shall I choose, yeah. Or what is craft beer, so it's that occasion understanding and data that can then point us in the right direction to get creative right.
Mark, I couldn't agree with you more. That's the end of the panel. Thank you very much. No, I really agree with you. Can we talk about Baileys for a minute? Because I think that it's the world's leading liqueur, and I'd love to hear a bit about how you're using media insights within that creative process.
Yeah, and Baileys is this amazing brand, world's biggest liqueur, but it was flat for a decade. We hadn't got the model right on Baileys, and one of the things that we were doing wrong is we thought that we had to do this big image makeover because Bailey's wasn't growing, so maybe people didn't love it, and therefore, we'd done these big, epic ads, kind of 90-second ads to make people fall in love with it again. And the bit that we'd got wrong was actually when we looked at the data, just people loved it. Loads of people love it. There's actually, Bailey's has more drinkers than any other spirit in the world. Wow. They just forget to drink it. And they drink it in small amounts because it's a small, sweet treat. So actually, we'd got the insight completely wrong. It was just all about having to trigger people at the right time.
Yeah.
I worked on Bailey's a decade ago, and at that time, we used to say, God, if only we could have somebody, whenever somebody goes up to a bar, if only we could pay to have someone stand next to them and say, would you like a Bailey's? And everyone would just say, oh, don't mind if I do. And at the time, we actually used that as a creative idea, and it led to a pretty rubbish ad. Because actually what that wasn't a creative idea, that was a media idea. We just couldn't execute it very well back then.
Yeah.
Now we can execute it because of technology, because of social, and because of the data understanding of, when are people at the point of purchase.
Totally.
And so that's really kind of fundamentally changed our approach. We talk about having millions of triggers to think to drink.
Yeah.
But that only works as well because of Hermeti and Mother, of what they're able to do, of having a personality and a point of view that is able to be funny in a 3-second GIF, or in a 15-second video, or in something that's going to pop up when you're searching for entertaining at home.
Totally. And so that consumer journey is absolutely critical, and the understanding of that is so important. Hermeti, so you're the ECD on Bailey's. And how do you see those insights from media come into play within the creative briefs that you see?
So as Mark was talking about, the strategy behind this millions of triggers, you can see from there that it's a media idea in itself. So when you start from there, you have to have great understanding of when and where and how you're going to communicate with people. So the whole plot here was to broaden the consumption occasions. Like Bailey's only ever came out at Christmas or a big festive occasion. So we realized that we had to talk to people a lot more, not only once in a lifetime 90-second ad. So that then led us to these amazingly insightful conversations about really kind of minuscule kind of like habits of consumption or media consumption that then immediately made their way into the creative process. So you couldn't have one without the other, really. And I think media then just allowed us to be very specific without ever taking our eyes off the bigger prize. So the millions of triggers brief was really, really great media-led kind of idea first.
Yeah. So can you talk a little bit more specifically about, when did the media insights come into play within that process? And
they come straight away, like in the very, very beginning. So you can't have one without the other. If you're just working on the ideas in isolation without thinking about where they're going to be dropped, it's a hit and miss exercise. You're going to fail more than you're going to succeed. So you cannot have the ideas at the beginning without thinking about the media, like the media placement of those ideas, because there are millions of them. And you have to know exactly where they are versus just thinking of an idea and then hoping that you work in a format in a space.
Yeah. And how much of that creative are you producing ahead of time, and how much of it are you creating in real time?
It's a pretty tight team operation. I think a lot of it is like live, because you're getting data and insights and feeding them into the process as they happen. So there isn't much planning ahead. It's just like, get them, let's act on them. Be smart, be funny, be meaningful in that 3 seconds, in those 15 seconds, when they're at home at night, when they're at work and everything. So they're coming thick and fast all the time.
Yeah. Mark, so has it been successful? Most importantly.
It has. So I said it'd been flat for a decade. Last year it grew 9%. This year it's grown 10%. And it's just really sort of re-energized the whole business actually behind the possibility of Bailey's, because Bailey's is this weird kind of category that it doesn't really compete with anything. When it's growing, it's just stealing a little bit from everyone else. It's like a sort of an extra little treat that people have. But we've lost the ability to trigger that across so many people. And I think the other thing that was really special about it was it taught us a lot about creating the right message, the right ad for the right format.
Yeah.
And it reminds me of one of my other brands, Guinness. The very first commercial ad break in the UK, 1955, Guinness was in the first ad break. So our first TV commercial.
Yeah.
And what the commercial was it opened with a big super on the screen that said, a Guinness poster comes to life. And then you had a freeze frame of the poster with a seal with a pint of Guinness on his nose and the zookeeper. And then they sort of press play and the zookeeper runs around chasing his Guinness. And at the end of it says, Guinness is good for you. And it was kind of because, we didn't understand the medium. So we took the conventional medium, outdoor, and stuck it on TV. And we'd kind of been doing the same with digital. We'd taken TV and stuck it on digital.
Yeah.
And it's only now that having that media thinking up front that we learn, as Hermeti says, in really sort of microscopic detail, how to use the format.
Yeah.
Like some obvious stuff, like sound off most of the time, some of it around kind of framing and so on, and also kind of time lengths to just make sure it's gonna land with people.
Yeah, I totally agree. The arc of storytelling is different within the different media. So, Matty, media and creative collaboration, how does that work in reality from a human level?
I mean, like we don't know any other way, like at Mother. So collaboration, when we speak with clients and other agencies, we just put the opportunity in the middle and collaborate, because that's the only way to get to the best work. I think it's not for every agency, it's not for everyone, but that's the only way we know. So, especially in this case, it will be absolutely lopsided. It's just going to be working in a silo. So I think, especially on Bailey's, because of the nature of the campaign, the team is not the mother team or the carrot team or the client team. It's the one team that is represented by these people sat at the same table all the time. Because there's no, I don't see any other way for doing this without collaboration. Because as I said before, like you're doing something without that knowledge in the hope that you work, it's silly.
Yeah, totally agree. Totally agree. So Gary, within the world of Mondelēz, obviously, you've been focused on old equity brands, modernizing those. What role has media insight played within the creative process within your brands?
And to your first question about crashing the party, I'd stick with this theme here, though. You guys media needs to be a VIP guest at that party, along with creative, along with the client, and like as you're saying. And I think I've, in my career, seen it done incorrectly and seen it work really well. And I'd say where it works really well is when media is a full-fledged partner in the world of fragmented media that we're all putting creative out into the world now. You need insights, you need media insights. And I'd say, our relationship with Cara is a strong one in that they are bringing us very solid media insights at the start, so that as we go into briefing a big project, we really can inform the creative development. And so you have to understand how a person goes through their day, and what they're interacting with, and where you can not just disrupt them, because the days of disrupting them are not working out as well for us anymore, and you need to find ways to be relevant where they are. And you're not going to do that, no offense, from the creative agency. The media agency needs to do that at the upfront.
Absolutely. And you work with multiple creative agency partners.
Correct.
And so do you see that media integration happening consistently across all of your brands?
Certainly. I manage our 5 globally led brand equities, and across, I have 5 different creative AORs.
Right.
And media, our global team at Cara, sits at the table with them. And we, at briefing stage and throughout the process, have everybody together. So the consistency that Cara, from a media standpoint as well, can provide in terms of our approach with those different agencies is really important.
And do you want to talk about Velveeta?
Yeah, sure. Talk real quick about Velveeta. Velveeta is a breakfast biscuit. It launched, 15 years ago in France under the Lou brand. We're continually trying to get more consumers, people to break their breakfast routines and have Velveeta breakfast biscuits as part of their breakfast. Breaking that breakfast routine, you need to understand what's their behavior in the morning. What are they doing? What's the activity? What are they thinking about? What are they viewing? And I think the media insights were very much about breaking in to the places and spaces where people are in the morning. We identified at a global level things, obviously your office, your commute, dropping the kids off at school, things like that, people who go to the gym in the morning. But in the UK, we took the global sort of insights of different pillars of where we could reach people, and the UK team, along with the global team and the regional team, lots of teams, consolidated and really developed, some terrific contextually relevant targeted messaging along with our partners at YouTube, who were able to take the creative idea about Velveeta as a new delicious breakfast biscuit, and tap into the morning commute on trains with some really contextually relevant content that was fun and engaging, with a train conductor, and it was lighthearted and humorous and sort of in a time when you're hungry in the morning on your way to work on a train, you're probably tired, or you're reading, or you're searching, you're on YouTube, a great way to reach consumers in a different space that was relevant.
Yeah.
And maybe the next morning they'll remember to have Velveeta with them for that commute and not be so hungry. But we did contextual targeting, really, I think YouTube was a partner with you guys, figuring out what were the pieces of content, what was the way that we could, from a technology standpoint, change the text in ads as they were being served up, and change it actually in the stations as they were going through as well, sort of on billboards and digital ones in the stations. So it was just a great partnership, and it started globally, and we can't manage everything, but I love the partnership that then was able to take it down and really do something meaningful in the UK with it.
I think that's a really interesting point in terms of global ideas and how you ensure that the framework for markets to operate in to have that flexibility. Do you think there's a requirement for consistent global creative messaging, but then the flexibility to activate differently in each market, or do you think about it differently?
I mean, my personal opinion is that you need to have the right strategy that connects with people.
Yeah.
And you can have a creative idea that does that at a high level.
Yeah.
And you can have assets that then can flex and work. But I mean, if I think about markets like India or Russia, Brazil, the US, UK, China that my teams are working in, we have to modify, we have to adapt.
Yeah.
But we are working and have centrally led global ideas, strategies and ideas that then can be articulated in different ways.
Yeah. Mark, how do you operate within that?
Look, it's really similar from our point of view. It varies a little bit brand by brand. So you take a brand like Bailey's or Captain Morgan, and actually the way that we activate them is pretty similar around the world, because the way that the consumer interacts with Bailey's, it's all about pleasure, and and so much of Bailey's comes from the unique. It's a product that is part cake, part booze, and so that's the same all the way around the world. A brand like Guinness, on the other hand, Guinness has been around for such a long time. It first arrived in Africa in 1827, and out into Southeast Asia and so on, and therefore it's kind of grown organically, and we've allowed it to do that deliberately, so that we keep the kind of central foundations of the brand the same everywhere. So the soul of Guinness is power, goodness, communion. Every brief that we write has to have those three things at its core. We talk about that through the platform of Made of More, which allows us to talk about both beer made of more for people made of more.
Yeah.
But that allows you to then kind of flex according to the market. So in the States, for example, where people have become so much more interested in beer, who makes it, how it's made, we've kind of changed that focus to be focused on the beer made of more. If you take a market like Indonesia, which is a huge market for Guinness, we focus there on something that we call Together We're More, because in Asia, this idea of made of more, particularly if it's a kind of individual pursuit, just kind of clashes with the societal approach of kind of collectivism. So there, the we is more important than the I.
Yeah.
And actually what we focus on in Indonesia is, one of the Indonesian country values is unity through diversity. And that's the platform that we talk about with Guinness over there.
Yeah.
So it all comes back to made of more, power, goodness and communion, but it looks very different in different countries.
Yeah. And I think there's more and more opportunity, particularly as media becomes increasingly digitalized, to ensure that those insights and cultural nuances ensure bubbling up to the global level to be able to inform the global, creative idea that's developed and those consistent values. Hermeti, what's your view on global creative toolkits and the amount of flexibility that gets in them?
It's definitely a smart idea to have a globally led, like a centrally generated kind of strategy and ideas, but if they don't allow for local nuances to being put into it, again, it more likely than not fail, because you ignore cultural differences and sense of humor and nuanced kind of, types of consumption of communication. So it varies brand by brand, but I think that's more of what we see all the time, is just a global team that is strategizing on a bigger picture, allowing for local teams to actually have an input and put some flavor of local knowledge and behavior.
Yeah, brilliant. I mean, I honestly think this has been fantastic, and I think that, Mark, you kicked it off so well in terms of, I think that media absolutely should sit at the head table with creative, and I think there's so much more media from an insight standpoint at a global and at local level can bring to ensure that that human insight is richer, the human insight is even more holistic and can inform more things than just media, but creative and marketing more broadly. I like the idea of VIPs coming together, creative, media, and client together, because ultimately I think that's what's going to deliver the best work and ultimately deliver the sales that you've seen on your brands. So thank you very much to the three of you, and thanks very much for listening.
Thank you.